Did Jesus exist? Most biblical scholars at least agree that someone named Jesus probably existed in ancient Rome and that he was killed by the government. However, despite being such a purportedly significant historical figure, the evidence for his existence is remarkably weak. Despite his supposedly being involved with major events that would have rocked the ancient world, there is no direct, independent evidence that Jesus even existed. Only original accounts of his life can be found in the four Gospels and Pauline epistles. However, the Gospels were written by completely anonymous sources several decades after Jesus supposedly lived, and the epistles make no mention of any earthly, human Jesus. Later Gospel writers also copied material directly from earlier Gospels. The oldest surviving copies of their works are translations of translations written hundreds of years later, and the wording in every copy contains alterations. Finally, none of the books claim to be eyewitness accounts to begin with. All of these issues are serious red flags for scholars seeking to validate historical claims. But even if those problems didn't exist, the Gospels and epistles were written by Christians eager to promote Christianity, and thus cannot be considered independent, unbiased sources. And then there are the historical inconsistencies within the Bible itself. According to the Gospel of Luke, Jesus was born in the year of a universal tax census, which started in 6 CE while Quirinius was governor of Syria. But Matthew claims Jesus was born during the reign of Herod the Great, which ended in 4 BCE. Since Quirinius' reign started 10 years after Herod's death, Jesus could not have been born during the reigns of both Herod and Quirinius. Not only that, but apparently Roman records reveal that the first universal census didn't actually occur until the reign of Emperor Vespasian in 74 CE, which was decades after Quirinius' reign. So the story of Jesus involves some serious historical contradictions right from the very beginning. But it gets worse. The Gospel of Matthew claims that King Herod had every infant boy in the region put to death, yet not a single historian of that period even mentioned such a mass murder, even though there would have been widespread outrage. And this includes the historian Josephus, who hated King Herod and made a point of recording all of his offenses. Matthew also says that Jesus gave numerous sermons to many thousands of people throughout Judea, astounding everyone with his teachings and amazing miracles of healing and raising the dead. His fame spread far and wide, and he even performed miracles for various important leaders in the region. And yet there is no record of any of this until the Gospels were written many decades later. Also, Jesus supposedly rode into Jerusalem and was greeted with a parade and citywide celebration for him as the miracle-working King of the Jews. Romans normally just executed rebels without due process, yet for some reason Jesus received a high-profile trial involving important leaders and celebrities, including the Jewish high priest, Pontius Pilate, and even King Herod himself. Jesus also had thousands of his own supporters, including such high-ranking leaders as a royal official, a centurion, a temple leader, and members of the Jewish ruling council. Yet nobody recorded any of this. There are even disagreements in the Gospels surrounding Jesus' death. According to Mark, Matthew, and Luke, Jesus died at 3 p.m. on the afternoon of Passover. But John claims that Jesus died on the preparation day of the Passover, which is one day earlier. This problem has caused Christian apologists to develop elaborate explanations to avoid acknowledging the glaring contradiction. Yet there is not a single record of any of this happening either. And it's not like these events occurred in some backwater region. Judea was a highly important strategic province for Rome, and during Jesus' time the region was one of the most well-documented in ancient history. Many contemporary writers recorded great volumes of information about the area. They even described several failed Jewish messiahs. Yet, despite Jesus supposedly performing so many dramatic events, sermons, and miracles that were witnessed by thousands of people and garnered the attention of numerous high-ranking officials, there is no evidence of anyone during that time writing anything about Jesus or the supernatural events that supposedly coincided with his birth and death. None. Such complete silence is simply not plausible if those events actually occurred. But that's not true either. The Bible itself notes that Christian communities already existed in cities as far away as Damascus, Antioch, and Rome, and for many years before Jesus' death. That's because there were multiple Christs throughout this period, with Christian followers who used different gospels and disagreed on major doctrinal claims, including whether or not Christ was even crucified and resurrected. There is also no indication that any of them had ever heard of Jesus or his disciples. Even among the early followers of Jesus' Christianity, there were many, including church fathers, who were disturbed by how similar the Jesus story is to older pagan mythologies. Because of all this, Christianity didn't radiate across the land in an unstoppable wave of conversion, as apologists often claim. Instead, it grew slowly to only a few thousand members over the first 100 years, and languished as a fringe cult for over 300 years. Its factions bickered and fought among one another until one sect finally won out and declared itself the one true Christianity. But it wasn't until Rome collapsed that Christianity began to expand significantly. Its teachings of disdain for earthly life and its embrace of poverty appealed to the rapidly growing population of the disenfranchised and destitute, while its forgiveness of evil behavior appealed to ruthless leaders and criminals. And since Christianity had an empire-wide independent social service system already in place, it was able to gain converts by capitalizing on the misfortunes of others. Once Christians had taken over the Roman Empire, they had the power to start forcing their beliefs on much of the rest of the world. So what are we left with? Translations of a few second-hand, partially plagiarized, and historically contradictory writings written many decades after the events they describe, and which have since been frequently altered by biased Christian scribes. The writings describe the life of one Christ among several, who fits a pagan hero stereotype, and who is supposedly directly associated with various fantastical events witnessed by thousands of people who, for some reason, universally decline to record anything about those events anywhere. Despite all that, it is quite possible that Jesus existed. But there is no credible evidence that he would have been anything more than some Middle Eastern rabbi around whom a legend was built. As with Hercules and Santa Claus, there may be some kernel of truth to the Jesus story. But is that enough justification to believe in him, much less worship him?